You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another roundtable episode.
We've actually, we can't call them roundtables because we used to do that for game nights, so we've been thinking of a name, and we came up with one.
We did. So these, we're going to call them Fact or Fiction.
Fact or Fiction. Soul Ring should be banned? We're here. It's Josh Lee Kwai. We are here also with Gaurav Gulati, who is one of our fine editors here at the Command Zone. I'm sure you recognize him from Extra Turns and other things.
And I'm Rachel Weeks. I'm back.
She's back.
Once again, Rachel Weeks.
Yeah, this is always a controversial topic that comes up in the community quite often. Soul Ring is maybe the most powerful card ever printed in Magic, among them for sure. It is legal in Commander, not legal in very many other formats, and so often the discussion kind of bubbles to the surface of, should it even be legal?
Yeah, I mean, that is the big question that we're going to try to answer today. So we're going to start with Soul Ring should be banned, and we'll decide whether that statement is fact or fiction.
There you go. New title for the show. Let us know what you think about it.
If you want to pick up Soul Ring or Fact or Fiction.
Right. Before we get into it, we should talk about our sponsors. If you don't own 50 Soul Rings like I do, then you should go to cardkingdom.com/command. That is the place to go to get all your Magic product singles, anything at all. March of the Machine, Aftermath, we got Lord of the Rings right on the horizon. Commander Masters after that. A lot of that stuff's not for sale yet on Card Kingdom, but as soon as they are able to sell it, they do take pre-orders. But, if you want to take Soul Rings out of your deck and put in other cards, which is the thing a lot of people espouse, well, you got to find out what those cards are. You got to go to cardkingdom.com/command, and you got to put them in a cart. And the great thing we love about Card Kingdom is they have the greatest service in the multiverse. And they also put all of your cards into one package. They have a huge inventory. So if you want to order, an entire deck all at once, which I've done many times at Card Kingdom, then it all comes to your house or your place of business. If you don't want your girlfriend to find out you spent more money on Magic cards like me, it all comes in one package. And so you just have your deck and it shows up and you just put the lands in and then you shuffle it up and you play it, as opposed to getting from a lot of different sellers where whatever, it's like the weakest link in the chain or whatever, that metaphor. Yeah, well, if one or two cards just doesn't show up for 2 or 3 weeks, you just can't play the deck yet. That's always frustrating. So cardkingdom.com/command, best place to go to get your Magic cards.
I'll say that stuff is really good when you're going to a Magic Con and you want to make sure you get your entire deck in at one time before you leave for the weekend instead of waiting for packages and stuff. So it's really good.
Yeah, and once those cards are in your hand, you're going to need to protect them. You're going to need to put them in a box. Go to ultrapro.com/command to pick up the sleeves and deck boxes and play mats and dice and binders and wall scrolls and little plushes and stuff that you need to be
The editors are all madly like, little plushes. I can find an image for that. Yeah, they do have them, though. They do have them.
They do. They've got a wide variety of everything that you need to be an invested Magic player. Make sure that your cards are safe and organized to make sure that you know what deck is which. Make sure you've got all of the different colors so you know exactly which deck is which, and they're all safe and sound. I like the Ultra Pro Satin Cubes. I like those, especially for my more expensive decks, because they fit double-sleeved cards. So again, go to ultrapro.com/command. They've got all of the licensed art. So if you've got a card that you love, or if you're built one of the precons, often they have a full set of stuff that go with every single commander precon. So ultrapro.com/command.
And of course, the final way to support all of our content is directly if you go to patreon.com/command zone. You can join our community. You can talk with everybody at this table. In fact, pretty much everybody at the office on our Discord. We're on there every single day. We play spell table games with some of our patrons. You get to watch Extra Turns and game nights early. There's merch discounts, all kinds of cool stuff. So again, patreon.com/command zone is the way to join that. We really appreciate all of our patrons.
Plus, we shout out one lucky patron every single episode.
Don't forget that part.
And this episode is dedicated
to
Samantha Kramer.
Samantha.
You rock.
You rock. All right, let's get into this fact or fiction topic. Soul Ring should be banned.
Yeah. Inflammatory.
Yeah.
Clickbaity.
Yeah, it very much is. Yeah.
Before we get into it, we want to do a caveat, a reminder that Josh and I are on the Commander Advisory Group. We are not on the Rules Committee. Anything that we say is our personal opinion and the opinion that we provide to the Rules Committee, who takes it and makes the decisions. Anything we say doesn't necessarily represent the opinions or the actions of the Rules Committee. Don't go out and sell your masterpiece Soul Rings or something. Relax. We're just talking.
We have way less influence than you think, I'll also say. Okay. So, Soul Rings should be banned. I mean, a lot of people do think this.
Yeah.
Why would they think that?
Well, let's talk about Soul Ring.
Okay.
Because Soul Ring is the most popular card in Commander by far. And
Popular defined as...
it shows up in the most decks.
Right.
So
it's the most ubiquitous card.
It is certainly the most ubiquitous card. Currently, Soul Ring is played in 2,090,444 decks on EDH Rec, which represents 84% of recorded decks.
So 84% of all the deck lists that EDH Rec
Has
scrapes,
access to, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And we know they don't go everywhere, but these numbers... Yeah, I don't think the 2 million means a lot, but the 84%?
But the 84% says a lot.
Kind of does, yeah.
They have access. I believe the number is like 2,500,000 decks roughly.
Right.
Is what they're measuring from. So it is a large sample size, and it is a huge percentage. Notably, the next highest percentage is Arcane Signet, which shows up in 66% of decks.
Right.
So like a 20% difference between these two colorless cards.
Big. Of course, it's always going to be colorless cards at the top of this list because they can go in any deck. Any white card would have a trouble because it can't go in a bunch of the decks. Of those 2 million decks, it can't. Can only go in a fifth of them or whatever.
The funny thing is, like, the third highest, like the top 10 cards is Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah, okay.
That's
it goes Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Swords to Plowshares, and then we start getting into...
What's the percentage of Swords to Plowshares? Do you know?
It shows up in 60% of decks.
All right. Okay, that's very high.
Pretty close.
Very, very high. Apparently people play more white than I thought, because Path to Exile is also in the top 10 cards. So there's more white in there than you'd think. Soul Ring also comes in nearly every precon. Notably, the only precon I think it didn't show up in was the Painbow Dominaria United precon.
Yeah, the 5-color one that came out last year.
No, the 5-color one.
Oh, Painbow.
Was that not Diana? Oh no, Diana's Mardu.
Diana's Mardu.
Right.
Yeah, it's the Jared Carthalion.
Right.
Carthalion,
Yeah. The crazy thing about Soul Ring to me is that they keep printing it and printing it and printing it.
And it's still worth $1.50
and it's still like $2 right now. Wow.
It's that good, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is I think we take Soul Ring for granted in this format because it's just, we play with it all the time. It's in almost every deck.
Right.
And so you're just like, it's Soul Ring's a card. But Soul Ring's Power 9 level card. Soul Ring is a net positive, no downside mana rock.
Yeah, some people call it the 10th power card. That wasn't like a power card.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of arguments to be made that it is more powerful than all of the Power 9. It just wasn't as rare, so it didn't make it into the group.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, Soul Ring.
Yeah, it should definitely...
It's come up, it's like 25 years later, though.
It did, and now it's still played. I mean, well, it's just played in Commander. So notably, Soul Ring is incredibly powerful. And it is, for that reason, it is banned in Legacy.
Yep.
It is banned in Oathbreaker. And it is restricted in Vintage along with all of the power.
Tour, Wheel of Fortune. Regrowth is restricted too. I think it's weird.
Yeah, there's a long list of restricted cards in Vintage, but you only get one in Vintage. Notably, Oathbreaker, which was just recognized as an official format, and as a lot of people would consider it like the closest cousin to Commander.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oathbreaker has banned tons of fast mana, including Mana Crypt and Mana Vault, and many of the rituals, which makes sense because of the signature spell thing. So that's a little bit different. LED is also banned in
Lion's Eye Diamond.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it is that powerful where we are the only format where Soul Ring is just legal.
Right.
I mean, everything's restricted in Commander.
Technically, yeah,
They're
you're
all
right.
restricted. Yeah. Restricted used to mean, and I guess still does, only one can appear in your deck. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it is the level of power. Like, it should be treated like a Mox. And
Right.
it's only $2 because they've reprinted it so many times.
Right.
So here's a question. Do you have any decks that don't play Soul Ring right now?
No.
You have Soul Ring in every single deck?
I have Soul Ring in every single deck.
How many decks do you have?
Even my
roughly?
5-color decks. I have roughly 10 right now.
Roughly 10?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I have about 25. I think it's 23, but it's around there. Anyway, no, I mean, I have Soul Ring in every one of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least I can't think of one that doesn't. I'm like, this deck might not know it has it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. How about you, Rachel?
I was surprised when I looked up how many decks I had without Soul Ring, and the answer is like 6.
Wow.
It's Sidisi, Octavia, Feldergriff, Haziza, and Princess Twilight Sparkle, and Tyam don't have Soul Ring in it. And a lot of those are like because they're very focused around one specific card type, where there's a lot of synergy around creatures, or there's a lot of synergy around enchantments.
Right.
And I don't want to take up a slot with a card that doesn't synergize. But would those decks be better with a Soul Ring in it? Yeah, probably.
Probably, yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons it's an auto-include in all the precons is like, it's an easy card to put in, and it's almost never wrong from a power level point to have it be in there.
Yep.
Now, you can make the choice not to, but there are very, very few decks that the time-traveling supercomputer would say,
right,
take out your 63rd card, put in a Soul Ring, and it wouldn't be better.
Right.
Yeah.
It's,
and that's one of the arguments sort of for banning it, right? Which is like, I think all of this discussion right here is to sort of prove the point, which is that it is ubiquitous. It is homogenous a little bit. Like, really the Commander format, and a lot of people have made this statement, is, Soul Ring plus 99 cards in a lot of ways. And, for those that see that as a downside, that is one of the big arguments they will make, as far as like, hey, it should be banned. That's like the signpost is like, well, it goes in every deck.
Yeah.
And that being a criteria for banning it, if you agree with that statement, that's the number one thing you'll list then.
Yeah.
Right.
There was another non-land card that went every single deck. Like, they would probably consider, if it was a new card, I mean.
Yeah.
Like, it's probably something that'd be like, okay, that's probably too good. Let's get rid of it. But
I mean, even Arcane Signet, which is in 66% of decks, Gavin has talked about, he's like, Arcane Signet was a mistake. And it absolutely, I completely agree that Arcane Signet was a mistake because it's better than almost every other 2-mana rock, including like in monocolor decks.
yeah.
So even recognizing that Arcane Signet, which is in 20% fewer of decks, is a mistake, is Soul Ring a mistake? Having it in the format a mistake?
Yeah, I think to address Gavin's thought there, I would say Arcane Signet, you can't take that statement in a vacuum, right? Like Arcane Signet, if a lot of other things didn't exist, would not be a mistake.
Yeah.
It becomes a mistake when the redundancy becomes so high. And I think that's part of the problem with Arcane Signet. If you took away every other artifact that can tap for mana and cost 2 to cast, and then you make Arcane Signet, I think you're probably fine. It probably still goes in a lot of decks, but doesn't feel as much of a mistake. But there's such a redundancy at that effect now, and that being the sort of best one that just sort of adds to the pile. I think that's and I think Soul Ring's in a similar boat.
Yeah.
Which is like, it feels like, hey, you can make the statement that it should be banned, but a lot of that's on the weight of cards you mentioned for Oathbreaker, because Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Jeweled Lotus, there's a bunch of other stuff that's kind of like clogging up that spot, whereas, the format's originally, and maybe it's not about this anymore, supposed to sort of be about variance. That's where the Highlander part of it comes from, the fact that you can only have one of anything. And so, that's it feels like it kind of goes against that philosophy when you've got a lot of redundancy of the effect. So yeah, it's an interesting case for Soul Ring. I'm clearly on the side of, I don't think that we should ban it. Should we state our opinions about the...
That's interesting. I mean, here's what does Soul Ring add to the format right now? Is like where I sort of wanted to start.
So you don't want us to state?
I mean, we can. I feel like it'll be clear.
Okay.
I guess we could say where we start, and then we can at the end be like, here's where we landed, but it'll probably be the same.
That's how debate works, everybody. Does anyone convince anybody of anything?
No.
Wait, did you both take debate in high school?
No.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, Josh did. Okay, this is going to be tough.
Just for a little bit. Don't worry, we're not doing debate. No, there's nothing like debate in high school. Yeah.
Okay.
Watch my In Response show with Prof, and then we used a little bit of it from like 12 years ago or whatever.
Okay. So let's answer the question. Yeah. Okay. Do you think Soul Ring should be banned?
No.
Yeah.
Do you?
I think it should have been banned.
Interesting.
I think when the format was born, it should have been banned then. And I think Mana Crypt should have gone with it. But these days, it's in 6% of decks. What did I say? 84%
so you're
of
no
decks.
But.
I'm a no but. is like, I think it's a mistake. I think
So you wouldn't ban it now, but you think they should have banned it.
I think banning it today would have massive repercussions. That is maybe a juice worth the squeeze situation, which is often the case when we talk about bannings. Like just starting with the point that it just makes 84% of decks immediately illegal.
Yeah, that's a big number.
Like a bad idea. Okay. So
But
what
yes,
about you,
so I'm
Gaurav?
a no but.
I'm going to take the stance of yes, it should be banned. Like,
Yeah.
I also agree with you, Rachel, that
Yeah.
at this point, I don't think it can be banned just because it's everywhere at this point. And it is also literally iconic for the format. Like, literally our intro has a Soul Ring in it. Like, it's everywhere. Like, everyone thinks about Soul Ring with your commander. But at this point, because we're going to have cards like Jeweled Lotus, like that's something they printed a few years ago. Do you think there'll be another card like that coming soon? Like, it's possible, right? The more Commander gets popular, it's getting more popular every year. Like, the more of these kinds of cards will come along. And I feel like if they nip it in the bud now, they won't have as many issues where Jeweled Lotus is, we'll talk about this later, but Jeweled Lotus is an $80 card. And it's because I think it goes in every Commander deck. And if they could print it with every precon, it would be amazing that everyone had access to this card.
Jeweled Lotus, you mean?
Yes, Jeweled Lotus. But at the same time...
Doesn't it sound amazing to me?
Well, the reason nobody plays, lots of people in casual decks don't try to play Jewel Lotus is because they can't afford it. It's a very expensive card. But if we ban Soul Ring now, I think it'll have a sort of chain reaction of those kinds of cards. Either they print those cards into the ground, like Jewel Lotus and Mana Crypt even. Mana Vault to a lesser extent because it has that untap clause or whatever, so it's a little different. But cards like that, I think you'll have less issues down the line. And so I say yes, go ahead and do it. I think it'll be a rough...
So if the rules committee came to you and they were like, Gaurav, we've chosen you, you're a smart person, and we've decided to just, we're deadlocked, and you will be the deciding vote.
Yeah.
Should we ban Soul Ring?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, okay.
I'm into it.
All right.
I want to see what it's like, honestly. Like, can
Yeah.
you imagine each one of your decks is a new slot, maybe 2 slots, who knows? Like,
Sounds horrible. 25 decks that I got to figure out.
yeah, sure. I think you could figure it out pretty easily, honestly. I think you'd be very excited for it, but
Yeah. So I like that we have a range of thoughts here, and it's I think as somebody who doesn't love what Soul Ring does to the format, I do think that it does something for Commander. I do think it has some positives for the format, and like you mentioned, it's sort of iconic. It's sort of what you think of when you think of Commander.
Yeah, it's the mascot of the format in a few ways.
Yeah, it's sort of like a Brainstorm to Legacy, or like Force of Will to Legacy. Like, maybe those cards should be banned power level wise, but they never will be because they're defining cards for the format. And I feel like Soul Ring fills that spot for Commander. And I think Swords to Plowshares is in that zone as well.
Sure.
Where it's like easily the best removal spell. Like a creature removal spell in the format. But
When you say Swords to Plowshares is in that, you mean
it is like
you could
iconic
make the
of
argument
format.
for banning it? Oh,
No,
okay.
no, it's just like it stands as this like. It
But from a
means
power
for-
level standpoint, it's just in a massively different.
Yeah.
Like, it's not broken in any way.
No.
no. And it's restricted
Yeah.
to a color
Whereas
as
Soul
opposed
Ring
to...
is like, it is a broken magic card.
Yeah,
like,
right.
it is it's I'm going to say badly designed, but you know what I mean, I hope, which is that it was an error in design. Right?
They didn't
Like, a
have
mistake was
enough
made.
information to know it was a mistake
Yeah.
when they made it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Is
think they,
basically it,
to be
yeah.
fair, it's very hard to design magic cards. They just designed Jeweled Lotus, which I would also consider to be a mistake, quote unquote. So they, there's always the possibility of that happening. But yeah, Soul Ring is too powerful for what magic cards should be, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think Commander wants to have the cards that are too powerful for what Commander for what Magic should be available to it, and that's one of the things people like about it. There are a lot of other formats, and a lot of them really are about competitive balance and are restricting the cards that you can play in them so that the playing field will be even, and that's not really what Commander's about. And I don't really, one of the things that gravitated me towards the format is like, I have all these cards and I can just play them in Commander. I don't have to worry about like which ones am I allowed to and which aren't, for the most part. Obviously there's a ban list, but it's pretty small.
Yeah.
So to me, that's an upside. The powerful part of it, it's fun to do powerful things. It's fun to play with powerful game pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's it can be compared to something like Strip Mine, where Strip Mine is banned in almost every other format as well. But Commander can support strip mine because it's one strip mine.
Yeah.
And it's sort of limited socially on like how you can use a strip mine depending on what playgroup you're in.
Yeah.
Plus, you have 3 opponents instead of just the one, which is a big difference for Sol Ring as well. Because in 1v1, Sol Ring is ridiculously overpowered.
Right.
In 4-player format, it's a little less, but still very powerful.
Commander is generally permissive of this stuff. We want you to play with the cards that you have. We want you to play with the cards that you opened as a kid. AT told me once, my partner told me when he came back, he was shocked that Sol Ring was a $2 card. He was like, that card should be $1,000. Like he was like, it's a Mox. Like this is no reason.
But it's one of the most printed cards of all time.
So, that's why it gets around.
And that's why it's $2.
Yeah.
And so it was this point that you're like, I get to play with these crazy broken cards.
Yeah.
And I think that we talk about Sol Ring having a downside of being like, if somebody has a Sol Ring, then they leap into the lead at the beginning of the game. But I think for every Sol Ring that's cast on turn 1, there's a Sol Ring that's cast on turn 4 that gets somebody back into the game. Like that, being able to make these huge swings mana-wise is part of the format. It does like push you forward into a part of the game. So it also helps colors that aren't green ramp. So banning cards that would ultimately help green, which is largely the most powerful color in Commander. Also, we did stats that said if you have a turn 1 Sol Ring,
1 through 3.
Yeah, in turn 1 through 3, it hurts you.
Yeah,
it actually hurts your chance to win because we should say the stats don't tell you reasons, right?
Yeah,
they're just numbers. So we have to interpret why we think the answer is what it is. So, Sol Ring had a negative effect on your win percentage. If you assume that everybody at the start of a game has a 25% chance to win, and then we controlled for who went first, because we found that going first was a pretty big advantage in a game of Commander. Going second, third, or fourth was not much difference between them, but going first was big. And then you control for that, and then you say, okay, but if somebody gets a Sol Ring or Mana Crypt turn 1 through 3, that was the question we asked.
Yeah.
How does their percentage win change? And it was negative. It hurts you. And the assumption we made, and this part we're not sure if it's right. It's just, I still think it probably is, but we don't know, was that because it immediately paints a target on you and you're kind of 3v1 from the start.
Right.
It could also be that you're keeping not a responsible hand because it has a Sol Ring in it.
I was just thinking that is, you have a 1 land, but you got a Sol Ring in your opening. You're like, I'll draw more lands. We've all done it. We've all been there, and then you don't. And even though you played that Sol Ring turn 1, you still become the archenemy, even though you don't play any more lands.
Right.
So.
And we should say as well that we can only see when the cards get played when we were doing our data, right? We were watching games and then writing down when they got played. So we can't really control for people who just chose to play their Sol Ring or Mana Crypt later, which I've done in games. I don't know if you all have.
Absolutely.
Where you're like, I have it early, but I don't really have enough power in my hand to kind of back up the hate that's going to come at me. And I'm just going to play this a little bit later in the game, look like I drew it off the top on turn 4, and I'll be less threatening at that point when I play it. Because like you said, a Sol Ring on turn 4 to catch up doesn't point a target on you the same way a turn 1 Sol Ring into a Signet does.
Right.
So again, we wouldn't know those things, so we can't see people's hands when we were doing the stats for the most part. So yeah.
But think about that for people who haven't played the game for 10, 15 years. You're a new player, you get a pre-con, and you're playing with people that you just met, and you play a Sol Ring, and they all attack you. And you're like, well, I'm just playing the card they gave me in this deck. And it's like, yeah, you became archenemy, but you don't really know to hold on to that till later if that's even an optimal move in your mind. That's something you learn from years of experience and thinking about it.
Right, but I don't think it's probably reasonable to ask that a new player is going to sit down and be as good as somebody that's been playing for 10 years. And I don't think we want to play a game where that's the case, right? We want skill to matter, and we want experience to matter. So I think that's a feature, not a bug.
Sure.
Yeah, I think keeping Sol Ring legal allows you access to more cards. It lets you play these powerful cards that you have an attachment to when you were a kid, and it does more than just the turn 1 Sol Ring. Like we judged the Mystic Remora on the difference between turn 1 or 2 Mystic Remora versus a turn 5 or 6 Mystic Remora. It's a different card at different times. But there definitely are some harms that it does to the format. Sol Ring generally is the most powerful card in the format by a long way.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to put Mana Crypt on that list.
Yeah,
Because
I
it's
think
the
so.
same card for 0 mana.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
damage is negligible and basically halved in our format.
But price keeps it out of most decks.
Right.
That's the big deal there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we should shelve that for a little later because
Yeah.
accessibility I would see as a negative, right? If something's going to be powerful, I don't like this argument that, well, at least it's expensive.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's like, well, that's not fair. I don't want to be beating people at Commander because I can afford more expensive cards than they
Right.
can.
Absolutely.
And so that I would see as a more of a negative than Soul Ring. At least Soul Ring is powerful and cheap. So like, hey, it's powerful, but everybody can play it. Mana
Yeah.
Crypt sucks more because it's powerful and not everybody can play it.
Right? It's like $200 now, and
Yeah.
they've reprinted it.
I
plenty.
don't know about you, but I have a lot of decks with no Mana Crypts, and I have a lot of not a lot, but I have a few Mana Crypts like not in decks, and I have decks I could put them in, and I
Yep.
just don't because I don't like that feeling of like, it just feels like I'm on a different power level than most people when I play the card. So I have a couple decks that they're in, and I know the games bring those out because I know like we're playing powerful decks, and it's that they're going to have Mana Crypt level cards in their deck, but the default game is not that.
Yeah.
Right. And this is something that Gaurav brought up earlier, where there is a lot of redundancy to Soul Ring. There's Soul Ring, this iconic thing, and then there's Mana Crypt, there's Jeweled Lotus, there's Mana Vault, which has its own asterisks to it.
You can even put like Grim Monolith on that
Grid
list.
Monolith.
Sure.
There's a bunch of Moxen that varying levels of playability, but some of them are very powerful.
A well-placed Dark Ritual can do the exact same thing that Soul Ring does. And
Well,
when
it's not reusable, but
yeah, but
Depends on the deck.
if we're talking about like a turn one,
Right.
If we're talking like about turn 1 through 3, which is a primary negative of Soul Ring, where it just puts you like 2 turns ahead of your opponents hypothetically. Dark Ritual on turn 1 will do a similar thing.
I mean, it can. What I would say is if you go turn 1 Soul Ring into Signet, you're untapping with 5 mana available to your next turn.
Yeah.
Dark Ritual doesn't do that. If you go turn 1 Dark Ritual into Signet, you have 3 mana on your next turn. So I think it is much better than a ritual. It can be used like a ritual. It can power out your commander very quickly. But part of the reason it's so broken is the ability to continue to use it. So your 2 mana advantage becomes a 4 mana and then a 6 mana, then an 8 mana, then a 10 mana advantage. And a 10 mana advantage is the most, that's when game winning stuff is happening. And so, but I did that on turns 1 through 4.
Right.
Yeah.
It shoots you through those early points where it's like the turn 1 Soul Ring is scary because of the explosive vegetation that happens on turn 2.
Yeah.
It's scary because of the Signet that happens on turn 1.
Yep.
Or it gives you a free
Get
equip
you
or something
your
like
4
that.
drop commander out on turn 2.
Out on turn 2.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, those are the huge things that it does.
Well,
and I would say that to me is like one of the biggest problems with Soul Ring and one of the biggest negatives in the format is that it leads to more non-games.
Right.
I would say a lot of games where Soul Ring gets played early are not non-games. People are able to team up, as we've learned, and get it under control. But there are definitely a certain percentage of games where Soul Ring gets played early where that person just goes to a lead and just ends up winning because nobody can overcome it. And I think most of us would agree that non-games in quotation marks is not what we're going for.
Yeah, they're not very fun for just about anybody. Even the winner, I would say, like, I kind of won this on turn 4, and I don't really feel good about it because everyone is so sour right now.
And that's sort of why the redundancy to the fast mana is the scariest thing, right? Is when you have a Soul Ring and you have a Mana Crypt and you have a Jeweled Lotus, now those non-games are, 3 times they're 3 times as frequent because you have 3 cards in there rather than just the Soul Ring. Where it feels like the average deck is like can high roll and hit a Soul Ring 8% of the time in the first. If
it was the only sort of fast mana you've got,
Right?
Yeah.
So
and 8% feels.
It's 8% you play it on turn 1 ish, and it's like 10% that you draw it and play it on turn up to turn 3, where it's still highly impactful.
So 1 in 10 games.
Yeah.
Ish.
But you figure 4 players have a 1 in 10 chance. That means somewhere around 1 in 2.3 games or so, there will be a player that has a turn 1 through 3 Soul Ring. And that actually, when you talk about it in those terms, it's coming up quite often. And this is when we're talking about a situation where Soul Ring's the only one of those in your deck. Now, if you add a Mana Crypt into one of those decks and you add a Mana Vault into another, and now it does start to become a thing where it's not that hard to skew the math here, where that's happening for one player almost every game.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think to go back to something you said earlier, Rachel, I'm almost arguing the opposite point here, but that's fine. That's fine.
Cool.
Yeah. I'm not super tied to my opinion as far as that is what I think my opinion is, but sometimes you find out it's not. About how you said, I think it should have been banned at the beginning of the format.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a mistake they didn't, but it's too late to do now. And I sort of give them a little bit of pass early because the environment was different then. A lot of these cards existed, but the support around them, the Arcane Signets and a lot of the other stuff didn't
Right.
exist. And so it felt like in the early days, early Sol Ring was kind of less impactful and happened less often. But that kind of thing is just kind of happening more because Jeweled Lotus and the other things kind of have piled on to make
Right.
that redundancy high. And so now it feels like all those pieces, you know, in some respects, we would like to go away, and Sol Ring's kind of the mascot for them. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, so yeah.
It's interesting. So it was shocking when we talked about Mana Crypt being worth the amount of money, which was in an episode we did a few months ago. We said having a Sol Ring and a Mana Crypt on turn one, so in your opening hand, or well, in your opening draw one and your hand,
You're
is
opening 8.
yeah is 15.6%, but you are almost 20% to draw it by turn 3. Draw one piece of fast mana, and that's just Sol Ring and Mana Crypt. If you add Mana Vault to that, now you're 7.6% to draw it by turn 3.
So that basically means if you're sitting down with 4 players and everyone has those 3 cards, almost every game somebody's going to drop one of them.
is
in
going
their
to have them
opening 3 turns.
in the opening 3 turns,
Wow.
which means that you're always chasing somebody down. And there are plenty of play groups where everybody has a Sol Ring and everybody has a Mana Crypt, and most of the time somebody will have a Jeweled Lotus.
And this is not even taking into account mulligans.
Right?
Yeah.
This is just opening hand.
Yeah.
And because we get a free mulligan, it's actually a lot more likely
Right.
that you're going to, because you're more likely to keep a hand that has a Sol Ring and more likely to throw one away that doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I when you look through games of Commanders, but like recorded games of Commander, you're like, it feels like, oh, someone always has a turn 1 Sol Ring, and you're like, the odds are pretty good that somebody has that fast mana early and somebody can have that explosive start where they ramp again on turn 1, or they ramp in a very significant way on turn 2. I played in a game recently where 3 of the 4 players had a turn 1 Sol Ring, and the 4th player was just like, what?
You're playing a
It's
different
almost
game.
better. It's almost better for them though.
Right.
If one person has a turn
They get
on
to
Sol Ring,
hide, yeah.
I don't. But if 2 do, I'm actually okay, because it's like, all right, you 2 are going to balance each other out,
Right. Sure.
and that'll give us time to like catch up.
Yeah.
Because that's the problem with Sol Ring, is it gives them such an early advantage. But usually by turn 6 or 7, the variance has evened itself out, and I've gotten some other powerful cards in different ways to, hopefully if you build your deck right. So I actually like it when more than one player has it in the same game. 3 versus 1 might not be the greatest.
It was
but
rough.
Yeah.
I was like, they are not going to be able to balance this out unless they've got a meltdown in hand.
I will say, for gameplay videos you watch online and everybody having Sol Rings, a lot of gameplay videos do what we do on Game Nights and Extra Turns, which is kind of allow a lot more mulligans. Because you're recording it. It's a lot of work. You don't want to have non-games as much as possible. So a lot of times people do the thing where they let you mulligan more, or sort of more liberally. What we learned through Game Nights, and as a rule we have now, is like, you can mulligan basically as many times as you want to get a hand that's going to like play Magic, so you don't get mana screwed, or you don't, and we always say though, if you mulligan even one time, you are not allowed to have a Sol Ring in the hand that you keep. Because what we found is if you allow a lot of mulligans, then they will always end up keeping a Sol Ring hand, because
they'll find it eventually.
That hand always looks good. Yeah.
It's always good. Yeah.
So if you'll notice, I think in recent episodes of Game Nights over the last year or so, there aren't as many opening turn 1 Sol Rings. There's very few.
Yeah. And those decks really don't have fast mana outside of Sol Ring.
And we find that, I'll be honest, I feel like the games are a little better. Yeah, because Game Nights for a couple of years there before we learned this was very much like arch enemy. Every game felt like very much one person got out ahead really early. The rest of the table either ganged up on them and took them down, or didn't. And the didn'ts are bad. The didn'ts aren't fun to watch.
Yeah. Yep. The final point we've hit on a few times, but it takes up a slot in almost every deck. We're playing 99 card decks basically.
Yeah.
It's like that and Command Tower.
Right.
But is that a reason to ban a card?
Yeah, see, it's funny. I think
Is
for
homogeny,
different players, that's a bug versus a feature. Do you think that it's inherently bad that it goes in every deck, Grav?
I think it is bad. I think it inherently is bad just because it goes in every deck, and it's a slot that could be useful for a pet card or a card that actually helps your strategy. Not that Sol Ring doesn't help every strategy, but that's what kind of makes it so good and so kind of boring.
But realistically, the decks that you don't have Sol Ring in, Rachel, because Grav and I can't talk to this, we have all Sol Rings in our deck. In the place of what the Sol Ring would be, it would not be a pet card.
It's a synergy piece usually.
It's not another ramp piece?
sometimes, but yeah, like it's if you were going to
put
is an enchantment deck.
Let's say you were going to put Sol Ring into the decks that don't have it. What would you take out? A ramp card, right?
A ramp card, yeah.
So it's in the place of a ramp card.
Yeah.
So it is not a pet card. Like everyone likes to say, well, then you can have one more pet card in your deck. No, you wouldn't. You'd have one less rampant growth.
Yeah.
Or one with one less mana dork, or one less mana rock, because that is that's the slots it's taking. And like, I don't think we're all going like, you know what I wish I could add to my deck? A rampant growth. You know what I wish I could add to all my decks? Another mana rock. Like, it's not going to add something interesting because it's not taking up the interesting slot.
It adds like a synergy card, right? So instead of Sol Ring, I put in like if it's an enchantment deck, it's an enchantment ramp piece. If it's a creature deck, it's a creature ramp piece.
Right. So it's Wild Growth or Utopia Sprawl. But these are all cards that we see a lot anyway. It's not going to be like some card I've never heard of in place of the Sol Ring, because that's not going to fulfill the role of ramp.
But it's still doing, it does mean that we're seeing, one card less and we're seeing another 15, 20 cards more.
Right, but those cards are not cards that are very interesting. Like you play a Felwar Stone where you wouldn't have because you have a Sol Ring. That doesn't make my gameplay experience better. Now, you play some card from Invasion that I've never heard of or seen. That makes my game a little interesting. I might take a picture of it. And that's cool. But that's not what Sol Ring's going to do. So to me, the homogeny is overstated. And I think for somebody who's built a lot of decks and owns a lot of decks, I kind of like that, like, all right, well, I know Sol Ring's going in there. And like, the reason I'm usually building decks is not to reinvent how ramp works in Magic, right? Like, it's like, cool, I need ramp because that's the format, right? Like, I have to be casting things ahead of time just to keep up with everybody else.
Yeah.
So I know Sol Ring goes in there and fulfills one of those 10 spots I need, or 13 spots or whatever it is now. And I don't have to think about that part of it, and I can concentrate more of my time on the fun stuff.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, whereas if I had to every time be like, okay, now I need a 10th ramp card. I've used the 9 best ones. What is it? It's likely to also just be like, okay, now everybody just plays Thought Vessel in that slot.
Sure.
Yeah, it's it will likely get replaced by just a slightly worse rock in most of the colors. In green, obviously, it could be, and other things, but
that rock, whatever it is, probably won't have the feeling of a Sol Ring turn 1.
It's definitely not from a power level perspective.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but from a homogeny perspective, I don't think that it really helps you to lose it.
I can see that,
I agree that homogeny is a reason that has been given for banning cards in the past, and there's going to be homogeny in the format. So, like, Swords to Plowshares is in 60% of decks.
Cyclonic Rift,
good cards
Rampant Growth.
Like, good cards go in decks.
Sensei's Divining Top. Almost every deck you got, if you put a Sensei's Divining Top in place of the 63rd card, it just is,
It's like Cultivate is like the 4th highest card. We're not talking about banning Cultivate. We're not talking about banning Command Tower, because mana fixing is good and should be cheap.
Right.
And so it may live on that line where it's like, if homogeny is the only reason that we think Sol Ring should be banned, I don't think it's a good enough reason.
Yeah. But with power level plus homogeny, now it sort of starts to become, and I can buy that.
The original reason that Sol Ring wasn't on the, EDH ban list originally was because, I believe, a little bit because of the price of it, because the Moxen were obviously ridiculously expensive and ridiculously powerful. Yeah. But Sol Ring was like not a rare at that point, so they were like, that card can stay. Yeah. And as the years have gone on, and those cards have stayed banned, like it's so powerful now that I like I said, I don't think it can be banned, but I think it'd be very interesting. But at the same time, when they print cards like Jeweled Lotus, and you go, wow, that's incredibly powerful. I wish I had it in every deck, because like I said, I think it would make every commander deck better. If they put it in every precon, it would become the other 98th card you put in every deck, because it is just helpful every time. It is basically a Black Lotus for your commander. Now, what if they unban Black Lotus? That would go in every commander deck, correct? Like, it would go, if it was an affordable $1 card.
Jeweled Lotus is not Black Lotus, though.
It's not.
Yeah. Because I think that if you have a 1-drop commander or a 2-drop commander, you don't necessarily want.
Sure, but it still pays for commander tax, so it's not even dead later on, is what I'm saying. Like, it's still useful.
It's not dead, but it's pretty bad.
It's not as bad as turn 1, yes, but I think it would go in 90% of commander decks. So.
Yeah, most of the time you're using a Sol Ring to get your commander out a turn.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think Jeweled Lotus is a mistake. I said so at the time. We were mad about it. I tested the set like years before it was come out, and I have emails where I'm like, please do not make this card. And they didn't listen, but so I'm with you about Jeweled Lotus, but I don't think it's quite as good as Black Lotus or even Sol Ring.
No, but I'm saying if Sol Ring is such a high power card, and they printed it into Oblivion, it's still $1 or $2 or whatever. But imagine if they did that with Jeweled Lotus. Imagine if they did it with Mana Crypt. Like, then everyone would have access to this power, and then they would play in every deck.
Right.
So the reason Sol Ring is in every deck is one, because it's amazing, but two, it's accessible.
Yeah.
It's very accessible compared to the other power cards.
Which I think is a good reason not to ban it. I don't want Wizards to be like, let's ban Sol Ring and then we'll rely on the Jeweled Lotuses now, because they're not going to reprint Jeweled Lotus in every precon.
Right.
They're just going to make it stay at $80 because that's better for them.
Yeah. Sure.
And like, at least now we've got a format mascot staple powerful early ramp card that is $1.50.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. We can get to it a little bit later, but I did look up how many decks Mana Crypt was in, because I was like, what is the difference?
Yeah.
Like, Mana Crypt is largely more powerful than Sol Ring because it's free.
Yep.
Mana Crypt is not even in the top 100 cards in Commander.
Yeah.
It is in 310,000 decks, only 12% of recorded decks. So it is, we're talking about a 65% difference, and that is entirely price-based.
Yeah. It's entirely cost.
It can be limited by, like, some people, we don't play Mana Crypt because it's not of the power level that we're shooting for, but most of the time it is kept out of decks because of price. And it's kept out of a huge amount of decks because of price.
All right, we got more to talk about
Yeah.
concerning possibly banning Sol Ring. There's some interesting hypotheticals coming up, but we're going to take a quick break first and hear a message from our sponsors. We'll be right back.
Whether you're searching for the latest sneaker drop, that iconic handbag, a timeless watch, or your next piece of classic jewelry, eBay authenticators are there verifying every detail of your purchase.
Yep, we're talking each inch, stitch, tick, facet, and clasp that make the piece you're searching for worthy of your collection.
eBay's authenticators are experts in their craft, true connoisseurs.
And as leaders in their fields, they're making sure your items always arrive as authentic as your style. So go ahead, get that piece you've always wanted.
And leave it up to the meticulous eyes of an eBay authenticator to make sure that watch movement is original, that glimmer is real gold, that rare sneaker is legit, or that handbag is really made of genuine leather, and never get faked over again.
In a world full of fakes, it's time to get real with eBay Authenticity Guarantee.
Everyone deserves real. Visit ebay.com for terms.
It can be frustrating. While my monkey bros get stronger off these bananas, there's never enough left for old Kibo Uktabi Prince. But lucky for me, I have a little secret. Factor! Factor is America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit and features a variety of options to keep you full, energized, and prepared to tackle whatever monkey business the day throws at you. So while my buddies are going bananas for their bananas, I can indulge in delicious meals, like their calorie-smart creamy Parmesan chicken. Yeah, I'm a carnivore. What's it to ya? Factor meals take just 2 minutes to prepare, are cheaper than takeout, and get delivered straight to your neck of the woods. Literally, no matter your goal, whether it's saving money or eating healthier, Factor can help you get there without having to sacrifice. So don't be a chump or a chimp, be a champ, and try it today.
Go to factormeals.com/command40 and use code command40 to get 40% off your first box. That's code command40 at factormeals.com/command40 to get 40% off your first box. All right, I'm going to cast Rampant Growth. Chauffeur,
Yes, sir.
find a forest for me, please.
Of course, sir.
Okay, wait, what is happening here?
Isn't it great? I got the idea from Indeed.
The hiring website?
Yeah, when you sponsor a job post on Indeed, they do all the searching for you. Just like you don't want to waste time looking through your library, you don't want to waste hours browsing multiple job sites. But with Indeed, you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Indeed's powerful hiring platform gives you a short list of candidates whose resumes match your job description the moment you sponsor a post. It's like hiring at flash speed. Plus, according to US Indeed data, candidates you invite to apply are 3 times more likely to do so than someone who just sees it in a search.
Your forest, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Jordan, if he's making you do this against your will, you can tell us.
I just like the word chauffeur.
Okay, you do you.
Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/CommandZone. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/CommandZone. Again, Indeed.com/CommandZone. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Welcome back, everybody. We are discussing, should Sol Ring be banned? Fact or fiction? Sol Ring should be banned.
Right? We gotta get better at making that a statement.
Yeah.
And then saying,
Sol Ring should be banned.
fact or fiction. That's the order it has to go in.
Yeah.
We're still learning because we just came up with the name.
Do we need a game show intro for it? Like, I mean, there's no prize for being...
Sol Ring should be banned. Fact or fiction.
There you go. There it is. Do that every time now.
All right. Well, we've got lots to talk about, but I wanted to do a quick question that is like, let's say there are no consequences to banning it. Let's say, like, Sol Ring was banned.
Let's say like
Let's
a
say,
magical
yeah.
fairy shows up at your house
Yeah.
and gives you $10 per Sol Ring that
Yeah.
got banned that
Yeah.
you're currently using.
Yeah.
So it's even an upside. People
Yeah.
make money.
Yeah. Is the format better without Sol Ring?
Right.
I would say yes. Also, $10 per Sol Ring.
Good,
Yeah, who's
right?
gonna say no to that?
Well, that's not about the format. That's about your finances. Yeah,
That's about the number of Sol
Yeah,
Rings I
exactly.
have.
Do not start hoarding.
I've got 6
Sol
that
Rings.
aren't in deck.
There's
Scott.
no,
I've got 6 that
there's
are
no
loose.
Sol Ring fairy. I'm sorry. There's only a tooth fairy. That's it.
Is it like I think it probably is. I think if there magically wasn't a Sol Ring, or if we were like, yeah, we banned it when the format started, I think the format would be more interesting.
I don't think it is, and here's the argument. The argument
Yeah.
is that of the cards that are in its class, it is the cheapest one and kind of the only cheap one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's way better for me, if I was a player that doesn't have as much money, for me to have one of 2 things
Mm-hmm.
than 0 of 1 things. So you can have something that I don't have
Yeah.
at all,
Mm-hmm.
can't compete with, don't have anything like it in my deck if the Sol Ring is not legal.
Yeah.
Now, you can have 2 of a thing, but at least I've got 1 of it.
Yeah.
And I would much rather be in that second position than I would be in the you've got a Mana Vault, you've got a Mana Crypt, you've got something that's in that class, you've got a Jeweled Lotus, and I have 0.
Yeah.
At least I've got a thing in my deck that is of the power level thing you've got. If you've got a bazooka and you've got 2 bazookas and I got 1, that's way better than you having 1 and I have 0.
Right.
So I would be much more in favor of banning Mana Crypt, Jeweled Lotus,
Yeah.
Mana Vault,
Like
things
losing
on that
just
level.
losing all the fast mana.
Which is a lot worse to a lot of people's pocketbooks,
Right.
obviously.
Yeah.
But from a format perspective of is the format better, I believe that's a better outcome than,
Yeah.
hey, we've got a bunch of decks now where now we just widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots, which
Yeah.
I don't think is generally great.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
That's why I'm just sure it's not going to get banned in the lifetime of Commander ever. But if it was that we could ban the other ones that are in the same class as it, then I think it would make a difference. But
Yeah.
just doing the Sol Ring might not be enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see. I think the format would be vastly improved by losing Mana Crypt and Jeweled Lotus. I don't even think Mana Vault has to
Mana
be on
Vault
that
definitely
list.
is in a
list.
slightly different class. 'cause
It's more
it
of a
has that
ritual.
untapped class. You
Yeah.
do need some synergy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like it goes in CDH decks, but it's largely just another ritual that
Right.
goes in any color. I think just losing. I mean, I suppose Jeweled Lotus is also just a ritual, but it's
It creates colored mana.
Yeah,
and it
it's
gives you
quite the ritual.
Dark Ritual gives you 2. You're up 2 mana.
Yeah.
Mana Vault, you're up 2 mana.
Right.
A whole nother mana.
Yeah.
Right.
From Jeweled Lotus.
Jewel
So,
Lotus,
yeah.
you can cast your 4 mana value
1.
commander turn 1.
Yeah, it's broken.
Wild.
That's nuts.
It's so upsetting.
Yeah.
So generally, I think the format would be better if we cut out a huge amount of fast mana.
But would you think it would be better if Sol Ring was gone?
If just Sol Ring
Yeah.
left, I don't think it would change anything.
Yeah.
I think we'd still have. I think there would just be more of a grab over a Mana Crypt.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
Mana Crypt's now worth $700 each
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something.
It's
stupid.
already
Which makes it even
$200.
harder to get if you're
Yeah.
like newer. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's you don't want the finances to play into like how you do bans and stuff, but it's part of it. It's
You-
part of the equation.
You have to think about it.
All right, we got a hypothetical. Let's throw out the Sol Ring fairies and let's just say they ban it tomorrow. Let's just say you wake up tomorrow and Sol Ring's banned.
Right.
How do you feel?
Well, I come to the office and everyone's running around,
Yeah.
screaming, going, "Ah! What do we do?
We gotta change the intro.
podcast.
It's like
what do
that
we do?"
Donald Glover
All of these-
comes in,
yeah,
everything is on fire.
Yeah.
Every episode we've recorded has Sol Rings in it.
Yeah.
We gotta change our opening animation. We gotta do it stat.
We gotta does our logo have to change?
All of
That's
our
not a
deck lists.
Sol
We have to
Ring.
go back to all of our deck lists and
We
change
got to
what-
refilm game nights. Yeah. So beyond that, though,
Yeah, just the immediate panic.
yeah, it
We
would
gotta
be-
sell all these Sol Rings.
Get them out now. Yeah, no, it would be interesting. I mean, obviously we would do a podcast of it just because we're here, but like, yeah, it's a, I don't know if it's a brave new world, but it is interesting to go into every deck and be like, okay, is it just a ramp card slot now? Like, is
Yeah.
that what it is? Or do I find a card that is just better for my deck that has been printed in the last 3 months and put that in instead and see what it is? Maybe it requires some play testing. Maybe a new theory would come out of Commander. I don't know. What could happen?
I mean, do 2-mana rocks get worse? That would have a huge, wide sweeping.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be that big a deal. I think
don't think
everyone
so?
would just put in like, what do I got? They don't have a whatever.
Stones.
It will be a ramp piece.
Guess all my crypts going now.
Yeah, there you go.
It would be a ramp piece,
Yeah.
right? It's going to be a ramp card because you know exactly what your deck's missing that it had before.
Yeah.
And so it's just choosing which ramp piece that
Now it's harder to do
Yeah.
for red or white decks. So would you just put a colorless mana rock that fits anyways, or?
I mean, if
what
I
would you
can't
do?
find anything better, then yeah, it's a Thought Vessel, Mind Stone, something that level. I mean, you're going to make your choices. Like, I have a Mana Crypt that's not in a deck. Would I think about it? I don't know that I would, because again, that makes my deck more powerful even than it would be before with the Mana Crypt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was purposely not trying to be up there. So I think, you're just looking at a Land War Elves or something you can. And if it's a red deck, then yeah, just whatever the 2-mana rock that's not currently in there. There's more than 10 2-mana rocks, so.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it would be. I'm a brewer, so I think I'd be excited. I think I'd be like 25 new cards coming out of the boxes. So I think that's a cool opportunity. But it definitely is like, okay, I have to sit down with all of my decks, and I got to find them, and I got to pull them out, and
That
go
part
dig
makes me
in.
nuts. Yeah.
Does
not sound like fun at all.
Like it
Yeah.
definitely it's a cool opportunity. I think all my decks going forward would benefit from it, but definitely I got 23 decks that need to change now. And like the precons that I have sleeved up that just sit in my house, those have to change.
Oh, right.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
That's the thing about every precon that's not even opened yet is illegal immediately. Which is insane.
The interesting thing about that is it's also precons for the next
Yeah.
Year
4
or so.
months. Yeah, like
Do them so ahead of time. Yeah.
they're going to have soul rings in them, and they're going to be immediately illegal.
I think if the rules committee was going to do this, and again, we're not on the rules committee, so I would hope this would be a discussion that Wizards they would have with Wizards, and there's not a lot of urgency to doing this, right? Like, let's say they decided we are going to ban Soul Ring.
Yeah.
There would be no reason that but we have to do it on Friday, right? Like, so they could easily have the conversation. We've decided we are going to ban Soul Ring.
Yeah.
We're all going to give you the heads up, and then we'll work with you so that you can stop putting it in products, and then we can ban it about that time, so you're not selling things that are current that aren't legal. So we're going to ban it in 9 months. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But we are going to ban it. So I think that would be responsible if they were going to.
Sure.
do it.
For sure.
Again, I think you're right. They're not going to do it.
Right.
But if they were, I hope they could be reasonable adults about it. Yeah.
and plan ahead. For sure.
Now, one way I think it possibly could be maybe banned is, what if Commander becomes even more popular, ridiculously more popular, and they're like, we want to do a competitive Commander format. And then it's like, Soul Ring is already at the top of the list of that thing. Like, do you think at that point they're like, okay, when they have a show where it becomes the card that gets played that wins every game or something, do you think at that point it becomes banned? Like
In a competitive
let's say
format?
it becomes the most popular competitive format as well. Because if it becomes competitive, let's be honest, it'll become CEDH at that point, right?
Yeah.
And at that point, they have a lot of targets to point at, not just Soul Ring, but...
I mean, I think if you're going to sculpt the ban list around competitive balance, then it will be completely redone, and it'll be a different format intrinsically.
Yeah.
I
So
also think it'll be a much longer ban list.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think it'll be hard. It's hard to do. They tried to do it on MTGO years ago, and it just was never ending, and the format was basically all Baral, I think, at the time. But like, whatever they did, the format would become all like 1 or 2 things, because it's just impossible to balance the card pool at 25,000 cards or whatever. But if they did, it couldn't be called Commander exactly anymore. It wouldn't be the format that casuals are playing. Like, they would have to re-sculpt it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why Soul Ring and Strip Mine can live in Commander is because it's largely a casual format, and largely the cards are used casually. Also, there's only like the fact that it's a singleton format obviously really improves things. But the fact that these cards are like, you're using a Soul Ring to cast a gremlin, like it's like I got my gremlin out early. It does those things allow these powerful cards to exist in the format sort of happily. I think if like talking about if CEDH should be its own format is sort of its own bag of bag of mess.
Yeah.
But because that ban list I think would be extensive.
Yeah.
It would be like starting with Thassa's Consult. Like
Yeah, Thassa's Oracle, yeah.
And Rules Committee has said over and over again that they do not ban to balance power level.
Right.
Except for the ones, I guess.
They
with
did Flash because
They did
everybody
Flash.
asked them to, and it didn't.
And it didn't
hurt
affect casual
So they were like,
formats,
"We'll
so
do
like,
it this one time."
I guess.
Yeah. Well, that whole argument is interesting, but to me, it's all in the hands of the CDH players.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
casuals don't. The whole reason CADH uses the regular commander ban list is because their pool of possible players is so small if they narrow themselves to a separate. They're basically creating their own format at that point, and if I can't play my decks in their format, I'm not playing their format. And so they say, we're the most popular format with the most players in the world, and they go down to, 1% of that, if that.
Yeah.
And so, it's in their best interest to stay in the greater fold of Commander.
Yeah.
But the downside for them is that,
they're beholden.
competitive balance is really hard.
Yeah.
But hey, listen, you guys can break off and do your own thing anytime. The problem now will be with that. A different problem, but still a problem.
Yeah.
Well, there's not that many players there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And making a new CDH format that will likely have a more restricted ban list, it doesn't incentivize people to like move to a more restrictive format. It'll incentivize people like, I can play Thassa Consult here. I'm just going to stay here.
Yeah.
Like I'll just play Commander. Why would I take things out of my deck?
Right.
And also, there's no guarantee whatever ban list they come up with even makes a format that they think that you think would be balanced, right? People have tried in the past and been unable to do it. So
Very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why the Commander ban list is generally permissive, is because it's much easier to let you play the cards you want the way you want and just try to communicate than it is.
It's pointless to try and balance it for competitive play. It just really is pointless. You're always going to be like, well, what about this, this, and this? So I'm with the RC on that. In fact, to the point where I'm actually farther in the unbanned stuff and just let us play more things side of things. And like whatever, people that want to play Broken Things should be allowed to.
Yeah.
And the rest of us that are willing to have a Mana Crypt sit on our dresser that's not in a deck will play that. And that's fine.
Yeah, and that's largely where Commander lives is just to let's talk about it and figure out where we're getting, because Commander is best in a play group, right? When there's an expectation where it's like we all play Mana Crypts here, and now all of us have 20% chance or whatever it is to draw those, and it balances. The problem is when you wind up at a Magicon or something like that where
untrusted play.
Untrusted play.
Yeah.
Where you don't know how much fast mana is in a deck, and that's where the communication really breaks down.
Yeah.
So there is some positives to the rules committee just being like, we're banning fast mana. We're removing that part from the equation because that is a huge difference between decks when you sit down at the table. Is that a Mana Crypt deck or is it not a Mana Crypt deck?
Yeah.
Does delineate a huge power difference.
I think a better way than banning cards would be to create some sort of a rule that makes fast mana worse. Now you would have to sort of define it, but this is bad, right? I don't think they should do this. But if you sort of the thought exercise of going down this path rather than the whack-a-mole with whatever card is. So let's imagine they said any artifact that taps for mana, if it doesn't cost 3 mana and now costs 3 mana. Just some sort of blanket rule that's just always going to exist.
Yeah.
And that makes Jeweled Lotus a lot really bad.
Really bad.
But it doesn't ban the cards, right? You can still play the cards. We've just now created a rule within the constructs of Commander only that so we can sort of get rid of fast mana without banning cards, without you having to remember this long list of things that you're not allowed to play. You can play the card, it's just bad.
Still play Soul Ring.
Yeah, exactly. And
You still play Soul Ring at 3 mana.
but it's just for a Dynamo kind of, right? And that's fine.
You play it less, but you still play it.
Yeah, you still play Mana Crypt probably, but I think that would be a better way to go if you're making the statement that fast mana is ultimately not as fun for the format, which I kind of do agree with.
Yeah.
I think, looking in that direction. But again, I don't think they can ever really do that because you also have to be careful that Commander doesn't become so different than regular Magic as to become not connected enough that people can move freely from one format to the other and still get what's going on. Yeah.
What if every player started with a Soul Ring in play?
Interesting.
Every player just starts with Soul Ring. I mean, it's already the iconic card of the format.
But then Mana Crypt and Mana Vaults.
If you all get a Soul Ring,
Right.
But it is, that's a really good.
Who
Does anyone get
Does
them?
anyone have a
Is it
soul?
in the forest? Can we hear it?
When everyone's super, no one's
No one
super.
is.
It is interesting because even then, if I get a mana crypt, the difference between me having 3 mana versus my opponent's total
Yeah.
of 3 mana
Yeah.
is a lot different than me having 5 mana to my opponent's combined 9 mana. It does actually skew the math in a weird way.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
It's
Rob.
an easier rule to do because you just have it in play, right? Like,
Yeah.
Funny. Soul Ring emblem.
yeah. something
Everybody
like that,
starts with a Soul Ring in the command zone.
Do you start with a Soul Ring and 6 cards, or you still draw 7?
Ooh.
I think you start with 7 and you don't draw on your first turn.
Oh, interesting.
I already think like player 1 shouldn't draw.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
to
yeah,
even out
yeah.
their advantage.
Yeah.
I
So
kinda
now you
li-
can't do that if you do that. But whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I kind of like that because then it's like anytime you keep a hand, you're like, I'm going to draw my first turn. I'll probably get a land. And it's like, not this time.
We
Yeah.
should do a whole roundtable fact or fiction episode where
Dang it.
I know the name of it, I swear. Where we talk about the crazy rules we've come up with because we have these discussions.
Oh, yeah.
You know what would fix commanders? This one rule. Yeah, we should talk about that.
Everybody gets a commander and a Soul Ring.
Gaurav
in
even
the-
launched like a weird internal format for 5
I did,
seconds.
yeah.
Like,
A few months ago, we did a format we call it King's Blood, and
Yeah.
there was a few slightly different rules, and one of the rules was about fast mana.
Yeah, but what you
anyways.
learn when you do that is how hard it is to
Yeah.
make a format because the unintended consequences of anything you do
Yeah.
really show up really fast. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
That was a little bit of a side tangent.
Yeah.
It's,
Everybody starts with Soul Ring is not crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
That is an interesting rule.
Yeah.
What if they leave Soul Ring legal and they just ban Mana Crypt and Jeweled Lotus?
I mean, I think that
that's
would
interesting.
Yeah, I think
Like-
that would be net good, but I
Yeah.
think there's this problem of like, listen, you are taking literal money from people.
Yeah.
Like the amount of dollars that you
Yep.
take, and it's easy for people to sit on their couch or in their room or wherever you are right now and be like, so what? So what if some person with their Mana Crypt loses $180 of value plus, an 80. Those jerks shouldn't have been having this. But those are people that, like, for the most part, are not millionaires, right?
Yeah.
Like they are people that have, they have hardworking jobs and they got kids and they have, there's kids with Mana Crypts and stuff that
Yeah.
hold it in a pack.
Yeah.
And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people
Yeah.
who just lose $300.
Yeah.
A lot more than that for some
Like if you
people.
could push a button and just be like, cool, a random 350,000 people in the world lose $300. You'd be the biggest jerk in the world for
Yeah.
pushing that button, right?
It's a
That's
hard
the
button.
button they'd
Yeah.
be pushing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then there's the other side of the argument, which is like, does the amount of enjoyment that it increases in the format add up to net cause more happiness in the world? And
Yeah.
those kind of calculations are impossible to make.
It's,
Yeah, that is
it's
tough.
really. And I mean, there was the same problem with Dockside, right? Where it's like Dockside was an $80 card.
Yeah.
Well,
and
there is the same problem.
There is- there is.
It's not past that.
I mean,
It's still
it's
in
still
it.
yeah, they
going.
reprinted it, but it didn't do anything. Where it's like, is the card correct? Yeah, huh?
Yeah.
yeah. Should it have been printed? No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Anyway,
We just would need like a trade-in program where you like, bring us your Mana Crypt and we'll give you,
yeah.
I don't know, whatever the equivalent of it is in product or something.
It's
I don't
brutal.
know.
It's like it's such a tough thing, and it's because these really powerful, especially fast mana pieces, go in so many decks,
Yeah.
and that price is just like. You don't want to punish people for not having the money to buy a Mana Crypt,
No.
and you don't want to punish the people that spent their hard-earned money on Mana Crypts. And
Or got lucky, opened a pack. I mean, a
Yeah.
large percentage of those people didn't buy it, right?
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
And not saying that there's any difference between people that bought it and didn't, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like, even the people that are like, well, if you had $200 to spend on Mana Crypt, I don't care if you lose that much.
Yeah.
But like, even you would have to admit that just a random person opening in one pack of Eternal Masters they got,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and got really excited that they should just lose that much.
But some people might have spent money. They might have traded in their really good cards to get a Mana Crypt.
yeah, or
Yeah.
a stack of cards.
Yeah,
or,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Might have won it in a tournament or something.
Yeah,
Like, there's
yeah.
a million ways you could get it. Yeah.
Exactly.
There's like ultimately bans just cannot be done lightly, and it's a lot easier to rely on these social conversations to be like, we're not a Mana Crypt pod, or we're not like like my play group, we don't play with Mana Crypts.
Yeah.
Like just pretty much at all. Like I have a CEDH deck that has it, and I have Mana Crypt in no decks other than my CEDH deck.
Yeah. Same, actually. Yeah.
And it's just because of a power level reason.
We shadow banned it on game nights.
Yeah. It's
It's funny, this conversation has become more about Mana Crypt than Soul
A little
Ring.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's because I don't know. I'm not sure why. It's because taking away the more expensive piece still does feel better than
still
taking
feels
away.
Absolutely.
It still feels it feels so bad to take away what everybody has, and just to give to the people who already have invested a ton of money in it, because that, like, you know, Mana Crypt is out of reach of so many players.
When you sit down in a casual pod, you expect Soul Ring.
Right.
You don't always expect a Mana Crypt. When you do, and you're like,
And you have a Soul Ring, so it feels even.
Yeah.
But when a Crypt comes out, even when I'm like, well, I got one sitting in my dresser, and I wish I knew you had one in your deck, because then I maybe would have played the deck that has it in it.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
It's also, there isn't the same repercussions of like all of the precons are immediately banned, and all of it's in every single one of our decks, and we now have to change all of those decks.
Yeah.
So it gives us this weird situation where I think we've all sort of decided that it's like, fast mana does generally not make for better casual games.
Mm-hmm.
However, the solutions to that problem
Are minimal,
are very difficult to justify, or are leave you with this puzzle where you're like, I hurt half the people, or I hurt the other half.
Yeah. I don't want to do any bans that hurt people. Like,
Right.
I don't want that at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a ban will always hurt somebody. But, you know, you don't want to do it for the wrong reasons either.
That's why I'm just like, unban basically everything, and allow people to have their own discussions with the people they're playing with. And I know I'm in an amazing situation that not everybody's in, where like we have a whole company of people that play, and we are around those people a lot, so we get to have those conversations. It's very easy for us to scope our play experience, and there's a lot of people who they're the only one that they're friends with that play, and they're going to go play at an LGS or at an event, and they don't have the luxury of playing with people they know. And so the fact that the format has some, guardrails is helpful to them. Yeah. So it's the same thing, right? Like, unbanning everything is probably not the answer, even though I would like that.
I wonder if there was, this is complicated, but I wonder if there were tiered bans where it's like, okay, these are banned in the format. These are so this is a certain level of commander. These are banned. So it's like we start with the ban list we have, and then there's like a tier B one where it's like Cyclonic Rift is banned, Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, this, and then there's a tier C where it's like, okay, these like Smothering Tithe is banned. I don't know. I'm just naming random Ristic Studies.
How dare you?
There it is.
But you can sort of are given a very specific guideline to be like, I play with this limit. Like, these are tier B decks.
It just gets so complex.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
It becomes like...
but it's a language. And right now, we're really struggle with a language.
It becomes Canadian Highlander, which just has this big list, and it's a cool format, but it's so complicated people won't play it because you have to like add up the points of the cards in your deck to figure out...
Buy a Black Lotus.
Yeah.
What if it was Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, Jewel Lotus? You can have one of those in your deck. You can't have any more than that.
It's like the cousin to Restricted.
Yeah, a little bit, because then you can, maybe Jewel Lotus is actually better than Soul Ring in your deck, because your commander is like so many colors or something, or costs a lot more than others.
Grav's got interesting ideas.
Right?
Yeah. So these aren't banned.
No.
Yeah.
But
just pick one.
Anything on this list, you can only have one of them.
Yeah, one of them.
So you could put Vault and a couple other things on there too. Grim
Basically
Monolith,
the point
maybe.
system, but it's
But you
like
only just do it for like 5 cards.
But it's very simple. It's easy to follow, right? You just pick one.
And that's great because Soul Ring's on there.
Yeah.
So you always
You
have
get the
the
cheap
access to one of them.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very, and then
we do have to have that Crazy Rules episode now.
Yeah, all right. I love it.
Factor. I don't know how you make it a Factor Fiction.
Yeah.
Factor Fiction. There are crazy rules we should implement.
Yeah, okay.
All right. That does leave only one question left.
Okay.
Soul Ring should be banned. Fact or fiction?
Fiction.
Fact.
I think fiction. But it's a very complicated issue. To the listeners, what do you think? Would Commander be better without Soul Ring? Without fast mana in general? Does that mean the rules committee should ban it? What do you think the best solution is to this problem? Would you rather have no fast mana or all of it?
Or start with a Soul Ring and play, or maybe have this weird
restricted
only
rule.
one of.
And only one may play.
Only one may mana. Yeah.
If you want to buy Soul Rings or Mana Crypts or any number of extremely powerful cards, you can find them at cardkingdom.com/command. You can always find the card that you're looking for in exactly the condition and exactly the printing that you're looking for. Plus, when you buy them, they're all going to show up together in one package, and you're not busy chasing down envelopes envelopes or digging them out of your mailbox, which is too small to have that many envelopes stuffed in it. Mail guy, stop.
Well, what do you want him to do? Not deliver it?
Yeah.
I should
It's not the mail guy's fault.
Yeah, it is.
Get a bigger mailbox.
Mail guy.
Mail guy.
Pay my mail.
My mail guy.
Get better, Carl.
CardKingdom.com for all of your Magic needs and support the show.
And then, of course, if you want to protect all of those cards you're getting, if you get a Jeweled Lotus or a Mana Crypt or a Mana Vault, please put it into a nice Eclipse sleeves from Ultra Pro. Put it into a Satin Tower or Satin Cube deck box. You know, Grav, you were talking about Magic events. Ultra Pro products are great for bringing your decks and everything to the events. Like, I really want to know that my decks are really secure in their deck boxes when I'm going to an event, because I've dropped backpacks, or sometimes TSA goes through them.
Yep.
Or
Yes.
you're often going in and out of your backpack at an event. Like, you got to grab a thing or whatever, and you don't want to, like, listen, I've seen people spill entire decks all over the floor.
Oh, I saw that in Minneapolis.
Yeah, so one of the things that's really good is when you have good product from a company like Ultra Pro, you know it's safe and secure inside there. It's not going to pop open, things like that. So ultrapro.com/command, the place to go. That's their direct site too. They have a lot of awesome deals. It's worth getting on their newsletter and checking a decent amount of time, because they just will have just like 40% off stuff sometimes. And you're like, I need a couple binders. So yeah, again, ultrapro.com/command. All right.
We are going to say thank you to our team here at the Command Zone, starting with Gaurav Gulati. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks
we
for
really
having me. It's
appreciate
wonderful.
it. And thank you to Craig Blanchett, Damon Lentz, Arthur Metacroft, Lady Danger, Manson Lung, Josh Murphy, Jake Boss, Jordan Pridgeon, Sam Waldo, Jamie Block, Bitch Trafford, Evan Limburger, Gabriel Pozos, Megan Yip, Eric Lem, and Jimmy Wong.
All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us. We will see you very, very soon. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Peace.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @JoshLeeQuai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.